The playground was filled with children's laughter when Go Seung-ho saw her. 2 years of relentless searching, 2 years of sleepless nights, and there she was, pushing a swing where a little girl screamed with joy. Beside her, an identical boy waited his turn, and Seung-ho's heart stopped. Twins. She'd had twins. When he'd lost her, he knew she was pregnant, but with one child. Now, seeing 2 perfect copies of himself playing innocently, the magnitude of what he'd missed hit him like a physical blow. Camille looked up as if feeling the weight of his gaze. When their eyes met across the park, she went pale as paper. Her hand flew instinctively to her chest, protecting the heart he had broken without knowing. The children continued playing, oblivious to the tension crackling between their parents. At 2 years old, they were too young to understand that the stranger watching them was the father they'd never known. Seung-ho took a step forward, then another. Each movement calculated, as always, but inside he was crumbling. 2 years searching for the woman he loved, 2 years without knowing he had not one child, but 2. Camille, his voice came out hoarse, breaking the tense silence of the park. Please don't run again. But she was already gathering the children, her eyes filled with tears and terror. 6 months earlier. The Moonrise Cafe sat in the heart of Seattle, a small cozy refuge among the glass and steel skyscrapers. For most people, it was just another place to get coffee. For Go Seung-ho, it was an unexpected sanctuary amid the chaos of commanding one of the most sophisticated import operations on the West Coast. At 35, Seung-ho had perfected the art of absolute control. Every word measured, every expression calculated, every movement deliberate. As leader of an organization that moved millions through containers at the Seattle port, he couldn't afford to show weakness. His legitimate businesses importing Asian electronics and art served as the perfect front for more lucrative and more dangerous operations. That Tuesday morning he entered Moonrise as he always did, silent, observant, emanating an aura that made other customers unconsciously step away. His dark grey suit was impeccable, black hair perfectly slicked back, and his dark eyes swept the environment with a predator's precision. "Good morning, the usual," the warm voice made him look up from his phone screen. Camille Turner stood behind the counter, smiling with a genuineness that caught him off guard. Rich mahogany skin glowing under the cafe's soft light, natural curly hair pulled into a high bun that highlighted the elegance of her neck, dark brown eyes that seemed to see through the masks people wore. "Double Americano." "No sugar," he replied, his voice naturally low and controlled. "Perfect. And how about trying our new blueberry muffin? I made them myself this morning." She leaned slightly over the counter, and he caught a faint scent of vanilla and cinnamon. "I promise you won't regret it." Seung-ho studied her for a moment. In Korea, employees were respectful but distant. Here, especially with him, people usually became nervous, stammered, avoided eye contact. But this woman, she treated him as if he were any normal customer, as if he were just a man. "All right," he said, surprising himself. Her smile widened. "Great choice, you'll see it's addictive." As she prepared his coffee with efficient and graceful movements, Seung-ho found himself watching more than he should. The way she hummed softly while working, how she greeted other customers by name, how her eyes lit up when she talked about the pastries she made. "Here you go," she said, sliding the cup and muffin across the counter. "And don't forget, if you don't like it, I'll make another coffee for free." "That won't be necessary," he replied, leaving a $20 bill. "Keep the change." Her eyes widened. "Sir, that's too much." "Seung-ho," he interrupted softly. "My name is Seung-ho." "Camille," she replied, still holding the bill. "And thank you. But really, this is too much." "The service is worth the price," he said simply, taking his coffee and muffin. When he tasted the muffin later in his office, Seung-ho had to admit, she was right. It was addictive. The next morning he returned, and the next, and the next. Always at the same time, 7:30 a.m., before meetings, before the chaos of the day began. Always the same order, but now Camille had the coffee ready before he even asked. "You're very punctual," she commented on the 5th visit, smiling as she handed over the double Americano. "Swiss watches have nothing on you." "Routine is important," he replied, but there was something softer in his voice. "I agree. I wake up at 5 a.m. every day to make fresh pastries. My grandmother always said that food made in a hurry has no soul." "Your grandmother was wise. She really was." Camille's eyes warmed with memory. "She raised me after my mother. Well, after she couldn't take care of me anymore. Grandma taught me that honest work and a genuine smile can open any door." Xiang Ho felt something strange in his chest, a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, genuine curiosity about another person. "And did it work?" he asked. "I'm still finding out," she laughed. "But so far I can't complain. I have wonderful customers, a job I love, and I can pay the bills. For me, that's success. Simplicity, honesty, contentment with small things." Concepts Xiang Ho had forgotten existed. 2 weeks later, the routine had become the highlight of his day. Camille always had a new story, about the elderly customer who came every day since his wife died, about the college student she let study for free in exchange for help during rush hours, about her plans to one day open her own bakery. "You never talk about yourself," she observed one morning, resting her chin on her hand while the cafe was empty. "I know you like double Americanos, that you're always punctual, and that you have the rarest smile I've ever seen. But that's all." "There's not much to tell," Xiang Ho lied softly. "Everyone has a story," she insisted. "Let me guess. You work in finance? Law? You have that important man vibe." If she knew how important and dangerous he really was. "Import," he said, technically true. "Asian products. How interesting. You must travel a lot." "Sometimes." Xiang Ho hesitated, then heard himself asking, "And you? Always wanted to work in coffee?" "Actually, I'm studying business administration at night. The cafe pays the bills while I work on my business plan." Her eyes sparkled with passion. "Someday I'll have my own bakery, specializing in pastries that mix traditions, my grandmother's recipes with French techniques I'm learning online." The determination in her voice, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. Xiang Ho found himself genuinely impressed. When was the last time someone had talked to him about dreams instead of fear or greed? "I'm sure you'll succeed," he said, and really believed it. The smile she gave him in response made something dangerous happen in his chest, something he had buried long ago under layers of control and necessity. Hope. As he walked to his car that morning, Xiang Ho didn't notice that for the first time in years, he was smiling. A month later, Xiang Ho had become part of Moonrise's routine. Camille always waved when she saw him arriving, had his coffee ready, and saved the last blueberry muffin for him. Other employees greeted him respectfully, but it was with her that he talked. Really talked. "You look tired today," she observed, studying his face with genuine concern. Rough night? Xiang Ho had spent the early morning dealing with a problematic shipment, rivals trying to interfere with his port operations. 3 men hospitalized, territory reaffirmed, message sent. But looking into Camille's worried eyes, he felt the weight of his dark world in a new way. "Long meetings," he said simply. "I hate when work consumes our lives," she sighed, handing him his coffee. "My grandmother used to say that a man who can't sleep peacefully is carrying too many burdens. If she knew the burdens I carry—" "Your grandmother had great wisdom," he murmured. "She really did. She always said she could see people's souls in their eyes." Camille studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "Yours have many stories." Xiang Ho felt something tighten in his chest. "Not all are stories worth telling. The best people are those who survive the worst stories," she said softly. "They know the value of kindness because they know the price of cruelty." For a moment, the cafe around them disappeared. It was just the two of them, and the way she looked at him, not with fear or interest in what he could offer, but as if she really saw him, the man behind the cold mask. "Camille," he began, not knowing what he wanted to say. "Yes?" Would you like to have dinner with me? The words came out before he could stop them. In his world, Seung-ho never acted on impulse. Every move was calculated, every word measured, but something about this woman made his carefully constructed defenses crumble. Her eyes widened, genuine surprise painting her features. You? Are you asking me on a date? Yes, he said, his voice firmer now that the decision was made. If you want to. A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her natural beauty into something radiant. I'd love to. That night, Seung-ho found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, being nervous. He had chosen a discreet but elegant restaurant, away from his usual territories, away from any chance of being recognized by associates or rivals. Camille arrived wearing a simple navy blue dress that highlighted her skin and natural curves, hair loose in curls that framed her face. She was beautiful, but it was the genuine joy in her eyes that hit him like a punch. Wow, she said, looking around the restaurant. This place is beautiful. You have good taste. Thank you, he replied, pulling out her chair. The gesture made her smile, a reaction that warmed him unexpectedly. During dinner, Seung-ho discovered layers of Camille that the cafe hadn't revealed. She had grown up with her grandmother after her mother developed drug problems. She had worked since she was 16, paid for her own college, dreamed not just of the bakery but of a life where she could help other young women like she had been. And you? She asked, delicately cutting her salmon. Family? My parents died when I was young, he said, technically true. I was raised by my uncle. That must have been difficult. It taught me to be independent, Seung-ho replied, avoiding mentioning that his uncle was the previous head of the organization, that his education had involved learning to command men through fear and respect. Independence is important, she agreed, but everyone needs someone, you know, someone who really cares. The way she said it, with a subtle vulnerability in her voice, made Seung-ho realize that behind her strength and optimism, Camille also knew loneliness. And you? He asked softly. Do you have someone who cares? She lowered her eyes, a ghost of sadness crossing her features. I've had some relationships, but they never worked out. I think I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Of being abandoned, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. My mother was abandoned by my father when he found out she was pregnant. He was a rich, powerful man, and she was just a common girl. When things got serious, he disappeared. I never knew him. Seung-ho felt something cold settle in his stomach. The cruel irony of the situation didn't go unnoticed. Here he was, a powerful and dangerous man, falling in love with a woman whose greatest fear was exactly what he represented. Not all men are like that, he said, his voice rougher than intended. I know. She smiled sadly. At least I want to believe that. My grandmother always said that when I found the right man I would know, that he would be someone who would choose me every day, not just when it was convenient. I would choose you, Seung-ho thought with an intensity that scared him. Every day, forever. But the words stuck in his throat, because how could he promise that when his own life was a lie? After dinner, they walked slowly to her car, neither wanting the night to end. Thank you, Camille said, turning to face him under the soft streetlight. I haven't had this much fun in a long time. Me neither, Seung-ho admitted. Would you like to do this again? Definitely, she smiled, then hesitated. Seung-ho? Yes, you're different from what I thought at first. Different how? At the cafe you seemed so controlled, distant, but tonight. She lightly touched his arm, and he felt the warmth through his shirt fabric. Tonight I saw who you really are, and I really like what I see. If she knew who he really was, she would run in the opposite direction. But when she leaned in and softly kissed his cheek, Seung-ho closed his eyes and for a moment allowed himself to imagine a different life. A life where he was just Seung-ho, not the head of a criminal organization. A life where he could love this woman without putting her in danger. Good night, she whispered, getting into her car. Seung-ho stood on the sidewalk long after her taillights disappeared, one hand touching the spot where her lips had touched his skin. For the first time in his adult life, Go Seong-ho was in love, and for the first time, that terrified him more than any enemy. 3 months passed like a waking dream. Seong-ho and Camille saw each other almost every day. Breakfast at moonrise, intimate dinners, walks at Pike Place Market, nights watching movies at her modest apartment. To the outside world, they were just a normal couple in love. Seong-ho had become a master at compartmentalizing his life. During the day, he was the cold and calculating boss who commanded million-dollar operations. At night, he was just a man in love with an extraordinary woman. "You're different," observed Seo Byung-hun, his right-hand man and childhood friend, during a tense meeting about disputed territory. More relaxed. "I'm focused," Seong-ho replied dryly, reviewing shipment reports. "Focused on what? Because it's not on business," Byung-hun pressed. "The men are talking. You leave earlier, arrive later, smile when you think no one is looking." Seong-ho looked up, his expression returning to the usual cold mask. "My personal life is not the men's business." "It is when it affects our operation," Byung-hun replied, unintimidated. "There are rumors that you're involved with someone. Someone. External." The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. "Careful, Byung-hun. Seong-ho, you're like a brother to me, but I'm also responsible for protecting this organization. If there's a weakness—" "There is no weakness," Seong-ho cut him off, his voice dangerously low. "And if I find out that someone is following me or investigating my private life, the consequences will be severe. Understood?" Byung-hun nodded reluctantly, but Seong-ho could see the concern in his eyes. And deep down, he knew his friend was right. Camille was a weakness, the biggest he had ever had. That night, Seong-ho arrived at Camille's apartment, carrying flowers and attention she immediately noticed. "Rough day?" she asked, accepting the pink peonies with a smile that made his chest tighten. "Something like that," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. Her scent, vanilla and something uniquely hers, always managed to calm the storm in his mind. "Want to talk about it?" "I want to tell you everything," he thought desperately. "I want you to know who I really am, what I really do, why I wake up every night in cold sweat thinking about losing you." "Just work problems," he said instead, kissing her neck. "Nothing that matters now." They made love that night with a desperate intensity that left them both trembling. Afterward, while Camille slept nestled against his chest, Seong-ho lay awake staring at the ceiling, knowing he was living on borrowed time. 2 weeks later, Camille arrived at the cafe with a different glow in her eyes and news that would change everything. "Seong-ho," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she served his coffee. "I need to talk to you after work." Something in her tone made an alarm sound in his mind. "Is everything okay?" It's just something important." The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Seong-ho tried to concentrate on meetings, reports, decisions that affected hundreds of people, but his mind kept returning to the nervousness in Camille's eyes. When they finally met that evening, she led him to the small park where they used to walk. The sunset light gilded her skin, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Camille, what's happening?" She stopped walking, turned to face him, and took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Seong-ho felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Joy, terror, fierce protection, panic. Everything mixed in an emotional storm he could barely process. "Pregnant," he repeated, his voice coming out hoarse. "I know it's unexpected," she said quickly, misinterpreting his silence. "I know we didn't plan this, that maybe it's too early, but—" "Camille," he interrupted her, taking her trembling hands. "You're carrying my child." "Yes," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "And I know it's scary, but I want this, Seong-ho. I want to have your baby." The joy that exploded in his chest was unlike anything he had ever felt. Pure, overwhelming, transformative. He pulled her into his arms, spinning her in the air while she laughed through tears. "I love you," he said against her lips, the words coming out before he could stop them. "I love you so much, Camille." "I love you too," she whispered back, and for one perfect moment, the world was just the two of them and the miracle growing inside her. But then reality began to seep in. A baby, a family, responsibilities that went far beyond protecting just Camille. How could he raise a child in his world? How could he be a father when his own hands were stained with blood? Seung-ho? Camille pulled back slightly, studying his expression. Are you okay? I'm processing, he said honestly. It's a lot. I know, for me too. She touched his cheek softly. But we'll figure it out together, right? One step at a time. Together. How he wished it could be that simple. That same night, while Camille slept with her head on his chest, one protective hand over her still flat belly, Seung-ho made the most difficult decision of his life. He needed to get out. He needed to find a way to leave the organization, to build a legitimate life for his family, no matter the price. But first, he needed to ensure they were safe, and that meant keeping Camille away from his world for as long as possible. He didn't know it was already too late. Seo Byung-hun was standing across the street, watching the apartment building through binoculars, a phone pressed to his ear. Confirmed, he said in a low voice. It's her, the waitress from the cafe, and from what I can see, they're very close. The voice on the other end of the line was cold, calculating. Interesting, a weakness our rivals could exploit. What do you want me to do? For now, watch, document. And if the situation becomes problematic, you know what to do. Byung-hun hung up the phone, a heavy weight settling in his stomach. Seung-ho was like a brother, but the organization came first. Always. And women like Camille Turner. They were complications that men like them couldn't afford to have. 6 weeks later, Camille's life had become a fairy tale. Seung-ho was attentive, protective, and completely devoted to her and the baby. He had insisted on paying for all medical appointments, had transformed her guest room into a future nursery, and spent hours with his hand on her belly, speaking in Korean to the child growing inside. What are you saying? She asked one night, smiling as he murmured soft words against her skin. I'm telling them about you, he said, kissing her belly. How strong, intelligent, beautiful you are. How lucky they are to have you as a mother. And about Daddy. What are you saying about him? Seung-ho hesitated, something dark crossing his features. That he will protect you both always. There was something in his voice that made her sit up, studying his expression. Seung-ho, are you okay? Lately you seem worried. I'm just thinking about the future, he said, avoiding her eyes. Wanting to make sure I can provide for our family. You already provide. We don't need much. We need security, he interrupted, a strange intensity in his voice. We need to know you'll always be protected. Camille frowned. Lately, Seung-ho had become almost obsessive about security. He insisted on driving her to and from work, checked her apartment locks repeatedly, and she had noticed strange men who always seemed to be around when they went out together. Seung-ho, you're scaring me a little. Why all this concern about security? He finally looked at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her shiver. Fear, guilt, and something darker she couldn't identify. There are things about me you don't know, he said slowly. Then tell me. I can't. Why not? Frustration was growing in her voice. Seung-ho, we're going to have a child together. There can't be secrets between us. Some secrets exist to protect those we love, he said softly, touching her face. Trust me. But for the first time since they met, Camille found herself questioning whether she really could. The next morning, everything changed. Camille was at the cafe preparing for the morning shift when Detective Angela Coleman walked in. She knew the detective. Angela was a regular customer, always kind, always professional. But today there was something different in her posture. Camille, can I speak with you privately? Of course, Camille said, wiping her hands on her apron. Is everything okay? Angela looked around the nearly empty cafe, then leaned over the counter. I need to ask some questions about Go Seung-ho. Camille's blood ran cold. What about him? How long have you been seeing each other? Why are you asking this? Camille's voice came out higher than intended. Camille, Seung-ho is being investigated by the FBI. He's suspected of leading a criminal organization involved in money laundering, smuggling, and... Angela hesitated. And violent activities. The world spun. Camille gripped the counter, feeling nausea rise in her throat. That's impossible. Seung-ho works in import. He's a businessman. It's a front, Angela said gently. Camille, you're in danger. If he finds out you know... Stop. Camille raised her hand, tears burning her eyes. Just stop. But the pieces were falling into place with painful clarity. The way other men behaved around him. The money he always seemed to have. The scars he never explained. The phone calls in Korean he took in another room. There's more, Angela continued reluctantly. We have information that rivals know about you. About your relationship. You could be being used as a target. My baby was Camille's first thought. My baby is in danger. What do I do? She whispered. Leave town tonight. We have a protection program. No. The voice came from behind them, cold as ice. Both turned to see Seung-ho standing at the cafe entrance, his expression more dangerous than Camille had ever seen. Two men flanked him, men she now recognized as the business associates he occasionally mentioned. Seung-ho, she whispered, instinctively placing a protective hand over her belly. Their eyes met across the cafe, and she saw the exact moment he realized she knew. The mask he wore with the rest of the world slipped for a second, revealing raw pain and desperation. Detective Coleman, he said, his voice returning to icy control. What a coincidence finding you here. Go Seung-ho, you're under arrest. I'm not. He took a step forward, and Angela instinctively moved her hand to her weapon. And I suggest you leave. Now. Camille, come with me, Angela said urgently. Now. Camille looked between them, her heart breaking. The man she loved, the father of her child, was a stranger, a criminal. Everything had been a lie. Camille, Seung-ho said, his voice breaking slightly. Let me explain. Explain what? She screamed, tears running down her face. That you lied to me from day one, that our entire life is a sham? It's not a sham, he said desperately, taking another step toward her. What I feel for you, for our baby, that's real. It's the only real thing in my life. But you're a criminal, she whispered. You hurt people. I protect you, he said fiercely. I've always protected you. From whom? From yourself? The question hit him like a slap. For a moment, Seung-ho looked like a broken man, not a dangerous boss. Camille, please. No. She backed away from him, each step breaking her heart. I can't do this. I can't raise my child in this world. Our child, he corrected, raw pain in his voice. My child, she said firmly, even though the words destroyed her. Because you chose your life, Seung-ho, and I'm choosing mine. She ran to the back of the cafe, grabbed her purse, and left through the back door before he could follow her. Seung-ho stood in the empty cafe, the sound of her footsteps fading, echoing like gunshots in his chest. He had lost everything. And for the first time in his life, Go Seung-ho didn't know how to fix what he had broken. The first 6 months after Camille disappeared were hell on earth for Seung-ho. He had mobilized all the organization's resources, hired the best private investigators, used every contact he had in government agencies and the criminal underworld. Nothing. It was as if she had simply evaporated. Maybe it's better this way. Seo Byung-hun had suggested once, during a particularly tense meeting. She knew too much. She was a liability. Seung-ho had broken 3 of Byung-hun's ribs that day. It was the first time he had laid hands on his right-hand man, but the rage he felt hearing those words was overwhelming. Never, he had growled, holding Byung-hun by the throat. Never speak of her as if she were a problem to be eliminated. But as the months passed, Seung-ho began to suspect there was something more behind Camille's disappearance. Clues that led to dead ends. Investigators who suddenly lost interest or found contradictory evidence. Trails that simply vanished. The first year was marked by a dark transformation in Seung-ho. He became colder, more calculating, more brutal with rivals and subordinates. He expanded operations to Vancouver, Portland, and San Francisco, always hoping a clue would lead him to her. Each new city was renewed hope. Each dead end was a stab to the heart. "You're killing yourself," observed Dr. Han, the organization's private physician, after treating Seung-ho for exhaustion for the third time in 6 months. "When was the last time you slept a full night?" Seung-ho didn't answer. How could he explain that every time he closed his eyes, he saw Camille's face when she discovered the truth? How could he sleep knowing that somewhere she was raising his child alone? He had started frequenting Moonrise every morning, sitting at the same table where he used to wait for her. The new manager always greeted him nervously, but Seung-ho just drank his double Americano in silence, staring at the counter, where she used to smile at him. At 18 months, Seung-ho had become an urban legend in the underworld. Stories circulated about the Korean boss who had lost his sanity looking for a woman. Some said she had died, others that she had fled with money from the organization. Seung-ho killed 3 men for spreading that last version. It was around this time that he finally confronted Byung-hun. "You hid her from me." It wasn't a question. They were alone in the office after a meeting about territorial expansion. Byung-hun didn't deny it. "It was necessary." "Necessary?" Seung-ho's voice was dangerously low. "She was pregnant, Seung-ho, a child in this world. It would be a constant target, a weakness our enemies would exploit. So you decided for me. I decided for the organization, for you, for her." Byung-hun stood up, facing Seung-ho's murderous gaze. "You think I enjoyed doing this? You're my brother. But I couldn't let you destroy everything we built for a woman. Where is she?" "I don't know. After she left Seattle, I lost the trail. That was real, Seung-ho. She disappeared on her own." Seung-ho studied his childhood friend's face, looking for signs of lies. He found only guilt and determination. "You have a choice," Seung-ho said finally. "Leave the organization now, with a lifetime pension and my promise that we'll never see each other again. Or stay and accept that our friendship died today." Byung-hun chose to stay. But something fundamental had broken between them. In the second year, Seung-ho had become an obsessed man. He expanded searches internationally, hired hackers to monitor hospital systems looking for birth records, used facial recognition at airports and train stations. Nothing. It was as if Camille Turner had never existed. He began to question his own sanity. There were nights when he woke up sweating, convinced he had dreamed it all. The cafe, her smile, the pregnancy. But then he would find a photo of them both on his phone, or smell her perfume still lingering on a shirt she had worn, and the pain would return with full force. Dr. Yoon, a discreet psychiatrist who served Seattle's elite, had suggested that Seung-ho consider the possibility that Camille didn't want to be found. "Maybe she's built a new life," he said during one of the rare sessions Seung-ho agreed to attend. "Maybe it's time for you to do the same." Seung-ho never returned to that office. At 22 months, something in Seung-ho began to die. He still commanded the organization efficiently, still expanded territories, still eliminated threats. But inside he was becoming a ghost. It was Jong Kyung-ho, one of his younger lieutenants, who finally had the courage to say what everyone was thinking. "Boss, with all respect, maybe it's time to accept that she's gone." Seung-ho had looked at the young man for a long moment, seeing in his eyes the genuine concern all his men felt. They watched their leader consuming himself, destroying himself for a woman who had chosen to leave him. "Maybe," Seung-ho had replied, and for a moment Kyung-ho thought he had finally reached him. But that night, Seung-ho was back at the computers, analyzing investigator reports, following clues that led nowhere. On the day that marked exactly 2 years since Camille disappeared, Seung-ho was driving aimlessly through the streets of Portland. He had come to meet a supplier, but the meeting had ended early, and he found himself simply driving. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was just fate finally deciding to have mercy on him. He saw the park and on impulse stopped. He needed fresh air. He needed a moment away from phones, reports. the endless search that had consumed his life. He was walking through the tree-lined paths when he heard the laughter. Loud, joyful, childish. Something about the sound made his heart skip a beat. He followed the sound to the playground and stopped. There she was, Camille, pushing a swing where a little girl screamed with joy. Beside her, an identical boy waited his turn, and Seung-ho's heart literally stopped beating. The child's eyes, his own face in miniature. Twins, two children he had never known. Camille looked up as if feeling the weight of his gaze. When their eyes met across the park, she went pale as paper, one hand flying instinctively to her chest. The girl stopped laughing, sensing her mother's sudden tension, and gripped the swing chains tighter. Seung-ho took a step forward, then another, each movement calculated as always, but inside he was crumbling. 2 years searching for the woman he loved. 2 years without knowing he had children. Camille. His voice came out hoarse, breaking the tense silence of the park. Please, don't run again. But she was already gathering the children, her eyes filled with tears and terror. The boy pointed at Seung-ho with innocent curiosity, looking between him and his mother with confusion. Man, he said simply, as 2-year-olds do when seeing strangers. Seung-ho felt like he had been punched in the stomach. His own son didn't know him. To him, Seung-ho was just man. Let's go home, babies, Camille said quickly, picking up both children with the desperate strength only mothers have. Camille, wait, Seung-ho said, his voice breaking. Please. She stopped, but didn't turn around. What do you want, Seung-ho? I want to know my children. They're not your children, she said, but her voice trembled. You lost that right when you chose your life over us. I never chose anything over you, he said desperately. I looked for you every day for 2 years. She finally turned around and he saw the raw pain in her eyes. Liar. I'm not lying. Camille, Stop. She raised her hand, tears running down her face. Just stop. You had 2 years to find us if you really wanted to. 2 years. But I searched. Then why didn't you ever find me? She screamed. I didn't hide that well. I'm using my real name, working, living a normal life if you really wanted to find us. The realization hit Seung-ho like lightning. Someone had sabotaged his searches. Someone close enough to have access to his operations, his investigations, Byung-hun. Someone stopped me, he said slowly, rage beginning to boil in his veins. Someone I trusted. Camille studied his expression, and for a moment he saw doubt in her eyes. That doesn't matter now. It matters to me, he said fiercely. It matters because I lost 2 years of my children's lives. It matters because you thought I had abandoned them. The girl looked between them with wide eyes, feeling the tension without understanding. She clung tighter to Camille's leg. Typical behavior of 2-year-olds when they sense something is wrong. Seung-ho's heart broke seeing his daughter hide from him. No, princess, he said softly, kneeling to her height, but keeping distance so as not to frighten her more. Daddy never wanted to abandon you. Daddy looked for you every day. Seung-ho, don't, Camille said quickly. Don't confuse them. They deserve to know who I am, he said, looking at his children, with overwhelming admiration and love. What are their names? Ivy, Camille said softly, pointing to the girl hiding behind her. And he's Max. Ivy and Max, Seung-ho repeated, as if memorizing the names. Beautiful names. Max, braver than his sister, took a small step toward Seung-ho, curious despite the tension. Man, he repeated, pointing again. Ivy and Max. Seung-ho looked at Camille, seeing the love and fierce protection in her eyes. She had raised these children alone, had been mother and father, had chosen beautiful names for them. You chose perfect names, he said softly. Ivy, still shy, stretched out a small hand toward Seung-ho, lightly touching the fabric of his shirt with a 2-year-old's natural curiosity. Seung-ho closed his eyes, feeling tears burn as he felt his daughter's tiny touch. Hi, princess, he whispered. The children's innocence, who didn't understand the complexity of the situation, was like a knife to the heart. Seung-ho looked at Camille, seeing his own pain reflected in her eyes. "They don't know," Camille said quietly, tears running down her face. "They don't know they have a father." Max, noticing his mother was crying, clung to her leg. "Mommy sad?" he asked with a child's simple concern. "That depends on their mommy," Seung-ho said, slowly standing so as not to frighten the children, but keeping his eyes on Camille. "Seung-ho," she began, but her voice failed. "I've changed," he said desperately. "I left the organization. I'm trying to build something legitimate, something clean, for you." "You left?" Genuine surprise painted her features. "I'm in the process. It's complicated, but I'm making it happen." He took a step toward her. "Camille, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I broke your trust, that I caused pain. But these children, they're my chance at redemption, to be the man you always saw in me." Camille looked at her children, who watched the conversation with wide, curious eyes, then back at Seung-ho. "One chance," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Just one. But if you hurt them, if you bring danger to their lives—" "Never," he promised fiercely. "I would die before letting anyone hurt them." "Then prove it," she said simply. "Prove you've changed. Prove you deserve to be their father." Seung-ho nodded, determination burning in his eyes. He had found his family. Now he needed to fight to keep it. And the first step would be dealing with Seo Byung-hun, 18 months later. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the garden of the house in Vancouver, where Seung-ho had built a new life for his family. Away from Seattle, away from his past, away from anything that could threaten the peace they had conquered. Camille was on the porch, watching Seung-ho teach Ivy and Max to plant flowers in the garden. At 4.5 years old, the twins were a perfect mix of both, her determination, his intensity, and a pure joy that illuminated each day. "Daddy flower," Ivy said, pointing to the rose seedling she held in her small hands. "That's right, princess." Seung-ho smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Beautiful flower for Mommy." "Mommy," Max shouted happily, waving to Camille on the porch. "Daddy loves Mommy," Seung-ho said, more to himself than to the children, looking at Camille on the porch. "And loves you two too." The journey here hadn't been easy. Leaving the organization cost blood, money, and almost his life. Byung-hun had paid the final price for his betrayal. But Seung-ho had kept his promise. He built a legitimate import empire, away from the shadows of his past. "Dinner's ready," Camille called, one hand resting on her belly where another miracle was growing, a girl who would be born in 3 months. "Come on, children," Seung-ho said, picking up Max while Ivy ran to her mother. That night, after the children were asleep, Seung-ho and Camille sat on the porch watching the stars. "Any regrets?" she asked softly, nestled against his chest. "Just one," he said, kissing her hair. "That it took me so long to find you again." "You found us when it was time," she smiled, "and now we're a real family. Forever," he promised, as he did every night. And for the first time in his life, Go Sung-ho completely believed in forever.